Well, my friends, Happy New Year and welcome to episode 232 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Pasquale Veri.
And I am Claudio Spera. Welcome to the show, everyone. Our guest tonight is a singer, songwriter, guitarist who has become a familiar name in the Kiss universe. From Kuarantine with Chris Jericho to Klassik 78, he has helped keep the spirit of Kiss Klassik alive for a new generation of fans. So he has collaborated with members of major rock and metal bands and contributed to standout Kiss tribute recordings. Beyond covers and beyond Kiss, Joe is an accomplished musician in his own right, active in both rock and country projects. So today, we'll dive into his journey and his connection to Kiss and the music world. Kiss Army, please welcome Joe McGinness. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, Happy New Year, first of all, and thanks for having me.
It's awesome to have you again.
When we found out that you're going to be back on the show, I went back to the earlier recording when you were on with Klassik 78 almost four and a half years ago.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, man, Claudio and I were so wet behind the ears, you know, and now here we are 4.5 years later talking to you again, you know, but I got to say it was a little bittersweet going back. And, you know, obviously with the passing of Tom,
yeah.
it came as a shock to all of us. I couldn't believe when I heard that.
Yeah, same. You know, that really was a huge blow, obviously, you know, to the Kiss world too. I mean, the music that he wrote was, you know, so unique in its way of, you know, not many people, I mean, writing a Kiss song sounds easier than it really is. And Tom was just an amazing talent. And boy, you know, talk about missing him. And sometimes I say, geez, I'd like to call Tom. And you realize, you know, wait, you can't call it. It's an awful feeling. And we do miss him. But thank you guys for acknowledging that. You know,
he's deeply missed. Yeah.
Oh yeah, once in a while I listen to the CDs, man. It's like he lives on in the music, you know.
Absolutely.
Never be forgotten.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Joe, again, you know, welcome back to the show, and we touched a lot on these topics when you were here 4.5 years ago. But we're going to go into a much deeper look into the person that you are, your musicianship, and talk a little bit about Vegas and stuff. So
Sure.
We're going to start at the very beginning. So the beginning being, what was your musical journey like? How did it start?
So it's interesting. I grew up in a very musical family. My mother and father both played music in a country band, believe it or not. So, you know, growing up, watching my mother, especially my father passed when I was young, but watching my mother and all my uncles and eventually my older brothers got into it. And, you know, I just couldn't help but pick it up just through osmosis, you know. Mm-hmm. It was just such an organic thing. And when you have a family that lives, breathes music, you know, it comes so naturally that, okay, I'm gonna do this too. So, you know, I picked up the guitar when I was probably 10 years old or so, and you know, the strings were that high off the neck, so it was really hard to play. But I remember the first song I learned to play was Deuce. My older brother taught me how to play Deuce. And I said, well, that's fun. Show me another song, and like Cold Gin. And it just kept going. So my older brothers are really kind of responsible for my Kiss fandom and a lot of my, you know, musical upbringing, because they taught me so much. You know, they went and learned all the songs and then taught them to me, so I didn't have to sit and learn them all up until I started playing with Kuarantine and had to learn all the, you know, blazing Bruce Kulick and Vinnie Vincent stuff. But yeah, you know, I had a rock band when I was a teenager, all through high school. And, you know, we played 80s rock, you know, Rat, Motley Crue, Kiss. So yeah. And then eventually, because of the country music influence, I decided to kind of get into that. So I did that for many years, you know, got some radio airplay, wrote some songs, and I still do it. I don't do it to the level I was able to do it at one time, just because I've become so busy with the Kuarantine thing. Is become a fun project. And sometimes it's nice to take a break from the original thing that you're doing to kind of have a little bit of fun, right? And do something different and grow your hair out and just, you know, be kind of wild and unexpected things, you know. You just never know where life's going to bring you. It's very exciting, you know.
So you came from a country background?
Yeah. My mother and father and aunts and uncles all sang country and classic like 60s rock, you know.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that it was primarily country though. And
Okay. So your
yeah,
rock influence, was that because of Kiss?
yeah, Kiss was for many years I was almost isolated because that's all my brothers listened to was Kiss. It was, you know, just constantly blaring in the house. There wasn't Jimi Hendrix, there wasn't any other kind of music except Kiss and country. So it was
Right.
the only, you know,
What a
as
combination.
it's funny as a young kid, Kiss was so exciting to see. My brother had the soul albums hanging on his wall, and they just
Wow.
were so impactful to me to see that. And it was very exciting. Then I was started watching Kiss Exposed and Animalized Live Uncensored, and just going, wow, like this band is phenomenal. And of course, as a kid, you're drawn to things that are exciting. But as you get into music, as a serious musician, you start to look at other things and appreciate them more. And I think I didn't appreciate country music till I was like 16 or 17 and say, there's a lot of great melodies, great songwriting. Because as Anton Fig would say, all music is related, right?
Hmm.
So,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, that's why a great song is a great song. Like Forever could be a country song if,
Yeah.
by
Hmm.
Kiss,
Hmm.
it's just a great song is a great song. So yeah.
Joe, we'll dig a little bit deeper on your inception into Kiss. So you mentioned something, about the family, your brothers responsible for this fandom. But when is it that you really got into Kiss? Like, it was nonstop. That's the first question. Then the second is, what aspect of the band actually made such a lasting impact on you? Was it the visuals? Was it the music, or both, a combination?
Those are great questions. So believe it or not, Kiss was always around. Like I said, I remember my older brother going to the Crazy Nights concert in 1987. I was like 4 years old, but I remember him getting ready and he's wearing a Kiss shirt. And I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to watch Kiss on the Crazy Nights tour." And I said, "Wow, a concert. I wish I could go to a concert." But it was always around, but I wasn't like, you know, totally hooked just yet.
Oh,
It was there and I liked it, but I didn't like go crazy over it. Um, so what happened was my brother gave me a Paul Stanley solo album cassette tape.
mhm.
And I remember listening to Love in Chains over and over and over and over, going, "This is the greatest song ever." And that was like phase one. And then a really pivotal moment in my life is when I moved. Uh, I was in the fifth grade. After fifth grade, my family moved to Vermont and I had no friends. It was starting over. All my friends were back in New York. And so I really had nothing other than my older brothers to kind of, be friends with at that point until school started. And I eventually made friends. But um, getting the Kiss albums through Columbia House
Yeah.
was like a thing that I occupied my time with, discovering all these tracks that I had never heard before. So I'd say like 94, 95. And then when the
Oh,
reunion happened, it was all bets were off. I was 1,000% in.
okay.
Um, and at that point, there was no turning back.
So at that point when the reunion happened, so did you have time to go back in the catalog? Did you know all of the albums from the 70s and all of that? Yeah.
By that time, I did,
Okay.
because like I said, I was kind of learning the music on guitar at the same time. Once I moved, like guitar and Kiss became the two most important
Okay.
things in
Got
my
it.
life. But the music was more substantial to me. The image was awesome, but the music, I just, as you're learning, you're like, wow, that's a great song, that's a great riff, and it was just so easy to want to learn the next song and the next song. So like I said, between my brothers and I, we had all of the Kiss albums and knew almost every track.
Right. Okay.
And it was just exciting to just find the next Kiss album. And
Super.
that reunion, just like I said, was a phenomenal time to be a fan, as you guys know.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
So, doing what you do, I think it'd be difficult to be influenced by only one band or one genre of music, because your music you're playing is so diverse. You could go up on stage and pretty much do anything. So
Oh,
what are some of your influences both inside and outside of Kiss?
that's a great question. So I've been everywhere musically. I've played in bluegrass bands. I've played in jazz bands. I've played in
Wow.
country and obviously rock, metal, oriented bands. So yeah, like I said, like becoming a guitar player and wanting to. So I just had this drive that said, I just want to know everything about guitar. And so I said, well, let me listen to country music. So, like Brad Paisley is a phenomenal guitar player in the country world. Brent Mason, these guys are just phenomenal players, and they just took my education on guitar to the next level. They
Okay.
just, Ace Frehley, Bruce Kulick are incredible in their genre. And then when you take these other styles and implement them and you put them together, you really kind of open up your vocabulary as a musician. So yeah, there was a lot of great country guitar players and singers. Big Ricky Skaggs fan, who is another
Mm,
phenomenal picker, and my mother listening to, George Strait or something even influenced me at some point.
Of course.
Because, like I said, that stuff is kind of ingrained in my DNA at this point, country and Kiss and all the other stuff I learned along the way. But, whenever you have a love for something, you just kind of go all in and you really kind of, it becomes part of you.
Mhm.
And speaking specifically of Kiss, how do you feel that the Kiss influence shows up in your playing today?
It's funny because that actually is not just in my playing, but in my showmanship. When I
Hmm.
was playing live as a country artist, you would do Paul Stanley style frontman moves,
Right.
where you're separating the crowd and
The
Yeah.
having
raps.
like so that
I
like
love it.
doing the Paul Stanley style frontman moves, and so they influenced me on so many levels. Whether it was, let's take country music and kind of give it a bombastic Kiss feel. I was using pyro and CO2 and all these other cool effects because that was from the Kiss world also. But believe it or not, there's songs I've written that one of them in particular is a country song uh, that I put on an album. But it started out when I was playing the riff of the chord progression of "Tonight You Belong to Me" by Paul Stanley, and
Oh,
then it obviously doesn't sound like it. Most people wouldn't recognize it, but that was the foundation of that song. Was, wow, that chord progression is cool, and I tweaked it a little bit, but you know, they've influenced me in so many ways musically, obviously, but with the showmanship as well.
Hmm.
And they're just so great at both. How can you not help but be moved by what they do?
Joe, we mentioned a couple of things in the introduction. So we know, and all of the Kiss fans know that you're deeply involved in Kiss related projects and
Mm.
initiatives. So can you walk us through on how you first got connected to the wider, Kiss world?
Sure, that's another great question. You guys are knocking it out of the park tonight. So many great questions. So when you have a love for Kiss, like I said, you want to kind of show it. So what I was doing was I was recording these Kiss covers, and I put them on YouTube back in, geez, probably 2009 or so, and I did like Firehouse, Tonight You Belong to Me, Modern Day Delilah. I was just like throwing out 100,000 Years, Love Gun, Down on Your Knees from Killers. I put all these covers out on YouTube, and I was
It
trying
was
to
just you and your guitar, just.
no, I would do the whole thing. I'd play drums, I'd play
Oh wow.
bass, I'd do
Oh
all the
nice.
backup vocals.
Oh wow.
So I sang the Gene songs, the Paul songs, and once in a while my older brothers would say, "Hey, can I play bass on that?" And I'd say, "Sure, have at it." Um, but yeah, I started putting those on YouTube, and years go by, and this guy named Tom Higgins reaches out to me, and I don't know how because it was a kind of incognito YouTube page, but somehow he found me, got my email, and reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this project, and I think you're perfect for it. The way you're capturing the Paul Stanley vibe and the production and all this. And so at first I thought he was crazy. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, I don't know, because I wasn't sure what to expect. And then he said, I'm going to send you some ideas of what I'm talking about. And he sent me a song called Let Me Rock and Roll You, which is on the first one. And I said,
Yeah.
holy cow, I am in. Let's do this. So that was probably 2015 or so. And when we started working together, I just realized that between his songwriting talents and his ideas and my ideas, I felt like we really had a combustibility, which was a good thing
Mhm.
when you're doing Kiss style music, right? So that was my first kind of introduction into the Kiss world, but I was still kind of unknown. The deal was we weren't going to tell anyone who we were. We wanted people to guess and just say, "Hey, maybe it is Paul and Gene." It's like as a joke, kind of. But at the same time, that kind of mystique lent itself to the Kiss style of merchandising,
It was
and
beautiful.
just yeah.
Yeah.
So we released it. Eventually, a guy reached out to me and he said, "Hey, are you the one singing the Paul vocals?" I'm like, "How did you find this out? Nobody knows. Literally, no one knew." And he said, "I just have a feeling it's you." And I said, "I'll tell you, it's me." I said, "But please don't tell anybody." And he said, "Well, my uncle is Charlie from Anthrax." And I said,
Charlie Benante. Oh yeah,
"Yes."
yeah.
And they
Oh
said,
my God.
Charlie is a huge fan of this band and wants to play with you guys." And I said, "Oh, wow." Uh, so fast forward a year or two, and Charlie actually joins the group.
Yeah.
So we recorded that album, and we were still unknown up until so the drummer in Kuarantine is a great friend of mine, but he also is a country drummer. He drums for a superstar named Luke Bryan, who's he's an American Idol judge, and he's kind of a big name in the country world. But the drummer for Luke Bryan knew Chris Jericho, but Chris and I had a mutual friend through Charlie Benante,
Mhm.
and so basically what happened was they, you know, I didn't know Chris at the time, but I knew of him. I knew he was a big Kiss fan. So fast forward when COVID happens, um, Kent, the drummer, and I said, "Hey, why don't we do some Kiss covers to occupy our time?" At the time, I was just doing strictly country, and releasing songs to the radio. And what happened was he sent it to Chris Jericho, and Chris said, "Wow, you guys need a singer." and, and Kent says, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, let's try it." So then he calls in PJ from Trickster, and then we started releasing music. And next thing you know, Bruce Kulick, messages me and says, "Hey, I loved your work on No No No." So that was kind of surreal. I'm a huge Bruce Kulick fan, and thankful to say he's a friend of mine now. But I still, uh, he's my favorite guitar player of all time, next to Ace Frehley. Those two really shaped who I am as a player. So yeah, COVID happened. Here we are, kind of at our houses recording this stuff, and Chris says, "Well, we can't have you as an unknown. We got to tell people, that you're in
Who
Klassik
you are.
78." Yeah.
Right.
And that's when all the guys in Klassik 78, Tom, Charlie, and myself said, "Well, Chris really wants to make sure, that I have an identity in this band other than,
Yeah.
the country singer." So
Yeah.
he's like, "Let's do it. Let's tell people who we are." And, we did shows, and it was kind of interesting. At first, we wore bandanas over our faces when we do interviews
Yeah,
and
yeah, with
stuff.
the
You guys know,
glasses
right?
and the
Um,
shades.
yeah, and
Beautiful.
boy, did it get hot when you're when you're doing an interview. So you really got to give props to Kiss back in the '70s for really maintaining their identity, because I had trouble doing it for for a little while. But yeah, we recorded that, and I never thought it would be a touring, living, breathing project. I thought it was going to be a couple songs, and then Chris goes back to wrestling, and
Yeah.
everything after that, it was just going to kind of fade into the sunset. But
Right.
nothing with Chris Jericho is ever half-ass or small. In his world, he likes to take things to a new limit and see how far he could push them. Um, So at that point, we started working with Bruce Kulick. We recorded Heart of Chrome together, and so that's basically how my introduction to the rock world kind of got set
Okay,
on fire. So
perfect.
strangely, it was a weird introduction, but hey, nothing is a surprise these days. There's just so much
Absolutely.
craziness, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's a perfect segue, Pascal. So you can take this one about quarantine because we wanted to ask Joe about how he got there.
Yes, because I remember before you came on our show 4.5 years ago, you guys were still debating whether you were going to come with the masks or not.
Yeah.
And then you
Right,
decided
right.
not to wear the masks.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, at the time, I knew a little bit about Tom. I knew Charlie. I didn't know who you were.
Right.
And
Right.
after the show, I started to follow you. And I
Oh.
remember, oh yeah, yeah. I started to follow you. I thought, this guy's amazing. What a musician.
Ah.
And I'm not just saying that because you're in front of me. I honestly mean that. I was following you after that show. And I remember when you joined Quarantine, I go, oh my God,
Yeah.
he's in quarantine. This is so cool. We interviewed this guy,
That's so funny.
that was so cool. So,
That is so funny.
this is nice to have you on today because now we can hear some of the story behind it. How
Mhm.
did it happen?
Yeah. So, like I said, in 2020, the crazy COVID craziness, and and finally meeting Chris through the drummer, and then eventually, like I said, Chris, when we didn't meet each other for the first whole year that we were recording remotely from home, and finally we flew down and recorded a video for "Love's a Deadly Weapon." In his home, his backyard. He brought a film crew in, and we did this whole thing. And so yeah, like that was the early beginnings of Quarantine. And then eventually we decided if we're going to play live, we need a second guitar player, and that's when we added the YouTube sensation Charlie Para, who
Charlie.
I think
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Charlie has been on your show. I think
Yeah.
he's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
have seen that episode, and another great guy. So you have PJ from Trickster, who is just a great guy and a great musician, a true professional. When we all got in the room together for the first time to play, it was kind of amazing that we just kind of fit together like a puzzle musically. It was just, it was like we played together for years, and it's just so funny how chemistry works, And I could almost say that it was a relief because sometimes you don't know what it's going to be like when you get in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got in the room, started playing, and we did Creatures Fest in 2022,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of fun. And eventually, we started talking about doing tours, and I'm thinking that'll never work, like how who's going to come to see an 80s Kiss band that just plays, deep cuts and maybe a couple hits. But I was proven wrong, 1,000 times over, because here we are, 2025, and we opened for Kiss, and we've been doing tours. I just got back from a tour from the Northeast. We did one, we played the Whiskey a Go Go last year.
Unbelievable.
So there's a lot of things that I just could not believe, came to the table and brought this project life. And Chris has a lot to do with that. We filmed the video for Unholy. We did that in Las Vegas a couple months ago, and it was released. And I think he said it has 1.1 million views already, and it's only been out for a month or so. But that shows you the love for Kiss, and obviously Chris has a very reputable career as a icon in his own right, with wrestling and music and
All of you guys.
podcasting.
All of
Yeah.
you. All of you.
Well,
All of
thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
but he really kind of, in the beginning especially, kind of had bigger ideas and bigger visions, and we're still evolving, but in his eyes, the trajectory should only go up. He always wants to just keep going and getting better and doing bigger things. And I said, well, I don't know. We just opened for Kiss, so it's pretty
What else,
hard. What else can you do after that? But he's definitely it's definitely a democracy in that band. Everyone has a say, and everyone gets a vote. but he has so many great ideas. It's almost and he knows so much about show business in
Yeah.
general. So like little things, he'll say, you did a great guitar solo tonight, but what if you did this at the end? And you're like, that's brilliant. So he has so much to offer, and he really is a phenomenal entertainer and great musician. He loves Kiss so much. But Kent, the drummer, PJ, Charlie, those guys are just so great to work with, and they have great ideas as well. But altogether, it's like a machine. Everyone has their individual strengths, that we work on, and it's so much fun.
Well, there's one thing that I can say by watching the videos, from Vegas. When you guys are together on stage, it transmits so much fun and energy, that you can tell that you get along great and you're having a blast there. So that you can feel it. It's amazing. It's more than music.
Yeah, it is entertainment in its own right, and it's a lot of fun. And the great thing is, a lot of bands, like I've heard Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons say, a lot of bands don't last for 5 years. Sometimes they, so we started in 2020, a very chaotic year, obviously. And, like I said, we're already at the 5-year mark, and we've never had an argument. We all get along great. And it's all
Awesome.
for that bond of Kiss and that urge to put on a fun show. And if you go to a Kuarantine show, you're gonna see the craziness that you saw in the 80s with Kiss, with the sequin costumes. I don't know if you guys saw Chris's
Yeah.
asylum style robe, and you're gonna see the bras and panties get thrown on stage. It's just it's gonna be that very 80s Kiss, retro vibe, but with with a little bit of a modern twist to it, right?
Right,
And
right.
and it's all in good fun, and nothing is more viral than fun. People want to have fun, especially these days.
I think it's the twist that makes Quarantine so special, because fans listen to Kiss with their eyes, right? When they listen to you guys, you sort of take the music to a different level. You don't have to be a Kiss fan to appreciate the music and how powerful it is on stage. It's the same thing with the Bruce Kulick band. It's like when they're up on stage, like the music, it's amazing. I don't like 80s Gene songs, but when you guys play it up on stage, like, oh my God.
That's a great tune.
Right?
Exactly.
That's actually a great song.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't like the way Gene does it. I like the way these guys
That's
do
so
it.
funny. That's interesting. Yeah. That, music is subjective, and whatever way that you experience it has a lot to do with it. And that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So any stories, memorable moments working with Chris?
Absolutely. There's been many, on stage moments, just, with craziness that happens. And like I said, people throwing bras and panties and doing crazy stuff like that. But, I have some some good ones, some not so good ones from, when you're on tour, you're going to run into stuff like the air conditioning is broken in a 500, 600 seat venue. And, it's like 100 degrees outside. And then you get all those people jammed into a venue, and it's really, really hot. But I remember looking over at Chris, and he's wearing this robe, and he's sweating and he's just giving it his all. And I'm just going, and then I look back at the drummer, and he's sweating. I mean, just to be exerting yourself to that level. And I just remember looking on stage going, wow, like, through the craziness, through this heat, we're all delivering. And it really makes you appreciate, Kiss and what they've done in the 80s or even the 70s with those costumes and working through all the seasons, whether it was cold or in the summer where it's blazing hot, with those outfits, the hair and everything. But I remember looking over at them and just going, wow, this is just incredible. And I remember the first time I met Chris, showing up at his house, in Florida, and here we are getting ready to film a music video together. And it really took me a while to, let it sink in and say, are you is this a dream? Is it just, some really strange, like a year ago you were singing country music, and now you're filming a music video for Love's a Deadly Weapon, a cover of 80s obscure Kiss song. But yeah, a lot of fun memories with those guys. Just, whether it's being on stage, being on tour together, getting to watch some of the funny things that happen when you're not on stage that other people don't see. But yeah, more often than not, I'm in awe by, just where we've come. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just the experience of getting there and sharing the stage with these guys, especially night after night, and when you're doing like we do them little mini tours, we'll do 4 or 5 shows and then take a break, then do another couple, just to work around schedules. But, some of those stories, I just remember looking across the stage at those guys and then looking down at my guitar and wearing this radioactive outfit like Bruce and going, wow, like, what is this? This is crazy, but it's a lot of fun, so much fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The next one, as you were telling us your story, I was thinking, that little Joe there at 10 years old, picking up a guitar and learning dues with your older brothers and everything. And here you are today, living one of the, I have to say, maybe one of the highlights of your musical life, opening up for Kiss, okay, in Vegas.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
So Keith LaRue, I'm sure you guys are aware of Keith through the Kiss world. It's a very tight community. Everyone knows everyone, right? But Keith, I believe, Paul is aware of us because I know Chris is friends with Paul, and Chris will send Paul and Gene our videos and our songs when they're complete, and what do you think of this? And sometimes Paul will send funny emojis back that aren't so favorable if they're a Gene song, especially. We sent him Love's a Deadly Weapon. He's like, that just sounds like bad Van Halen that we wrote. He goes, I don't know why you guys would cover that. Pretty much is what he was getting at. But then you send a Paul song and he's like, great job. But Gene is always a sweetheart and always has nothing but nice things to say. But Keith LaRue, I believe, was involved in helping us get to that point.
Okay.
And I believe some other people, because of the same people that put that on eventually at some point did Chris Jericho's cruise for Norwegian.
Okay.
So there was some sort of connection. At first they thought about getting us, and then we were off, and then we were back on. So I don't really know. I just remember getting the word that we were actually doing it. And I said, I will believe it when I'm on the stage. And, I said, up until then, I'm not getting my hopes up, because you just never know, it's, well, sorry guys, storm came through, we have to cancel. I've been there in the music business. I've been there, you're waiting for this big moment and, something might happen, but it may be a very pessimistic thing, but I like to call it realistic, because, but just to even be on the same bill, was exciting. So we got there that day, and I'm, getting up on that stage, looking at the inflatable Kiss statues, statue things that they had, and the Kiss sign that they had on the Intrepid for the reunion tour. Yeah. And I think they used it overseas too. And I'm looking at this going, holy cow, like a 6,000. You couldn't believe it, huh? Oh my God. Yeah, it was a 6,000 seat arena, which is small for Kiss, but for Kuarantine, that's a big venue. It's still a great size venue. But Gene likes to, say, oh, this is a small gig for us, So yeah, we're on that stage. I'm sound checking, and I'm just looking back at that logo the whole time, going, "Wow, this is just incredible."
I'm here. Yeah.
Yes, and you're right. 10-year-old me is just going, "Holy cow!"
Exactly.
You've gotten here. I don't know how you got here, but super glad that you did. But we hit the stage. The lights came on, and something happened where I just played it was effortless for some reason. It was just like it was like do or die. I know backstage, I know what it was set up like, because Gene and Paul were back there, and we're saying hi to them, give them a nod when they walk through the hallway. But each dressing room has a TV where you could watch the show, whoever's on stage, and there's a direct feed, to the TV. So I'm thinking, geez, Gene and Paul, Tommy and Eric
We're
are probably
watching.
up there criticizing our every move. So, even though it just kind of came out and it was kind of effortless for me at least.
Well, it's in your DNA, as you said before, right?
Right. Yeah. And we had played, a couple nights before in California to kind of warm up and kind of
Right.
work out some bugs. But it was very, very surreal. That word gets used a lot, but this is one time in my life where I could truly say it was a very surreal moment. And I'm super grateful for it.
Did you enjoy it, or you were kind of so nervous that it went fast, or you couldn't?
I was nervous leading up to it, but at the same time, I felt as if you don't have time to be nervous.
Yeah,
like
right.
they like we had because of the scheduling and some of the events kind of rushing or rolling over into some of our sound check time, and you're nothing is on schedule. Yeah. So literally we sound checked and they're like, well, you guys go on in like 20 minutes. It was like, holy cow, I have enough time to go up and throw my outfit on and come back down. And it was like getting shot out of a cannon. So we went out and I was like, well, I'm going to give it my all, but it kind of just came out and
beautiful.
And those Bruce Kulick solos are, I got to tell you, they're not easy to play. So I have to put a lot of effort in, but that night it was just like, something kind of took over me,
Nice.
But very, very surreal.
Nice.
Joe, you made a divorced guy believe in marriage. And talk about an amazing marriage, right? We're talking about Kuarantine, the Bruce Kulick band. Then you were asked to be a part of the Bruce Kulick band.
Yeah, so I've played with Bruce in the past, with other events, and I've played, but this one was a little bit more official. Like I played the whole Alive 3 set with Bruce in Sarasota, Florida a couple years ago. And then I played a few songs with Eric and Bruce at Kiss Cancer Goodbye. Yeah. So like I had kind of, like I said, Bruce has kind of always said, hey, I might need you for this. I might need you for that. But this time was, he's like, I definitely need you for this one. And I'm going to take care. I'm going to make sure that you're situated. So whatever you need, I said, well, geez, I don't need a whole lot. I'm playing with Bruce, it's, Todd Kearns, Bruce Kulick and Brent Fitz, phenomenal. Obviously Zach is a phenomenal musician. He's playing with Jerry Cantrell now, but he's super busy. But I was, very, very grateful to Bruce, and just kind of, once again, it was just so surreal to be on stage, looking out in front of 6,000 people singing, some of the obscure tracks from Bruce's era. So yeah, it was a very, very fun gig. I do know that it was to have a bass around you and sing those Gene songs. You almost have to it brings out something in you, and it's funny to think about. But when you're a musician and you play guitar, it's whatever. But Kiss, those personas come out sometimes when you're playing their music, and it's kind of funny. And I don't know how else to explain it, but we got up there, and blasted into Creatures of the Night, and then it was just a bunch of rarities from, we did a Revenge medley, and after the show, I was thinking, wow, that was fun, and but Eddie Trunk and a lot of other people gave it great reviews, and I said, wow, that's even more of a bonus, So
it seems that almost every second episode we talk about the legacy of Kiss on the show, and I said it a million times before. It's the legacy. It's in its music, and Kiss has always played the same songs over and over again. And it's bands like Kuarantine and the Bruce Kulick band that play stuff that we wish we heard but never have, and now we do. So I strongly believe that when people start looking at the legacy of Kiss, they're going to remember bands like Kuarantine and the Bruce Kulick band, and you were a part of that. You are a huge part of the Kiss legacy, and that's just an amazing accomplishment.
Oh, well, thanks. Their music is, it's so much responsible for the friendships. I mean, we're all
Absolutely.
connected
Yeah.
through this band and what they've done, and to even be a little blip on that, part of their legacy, whether it's continuing their music, live in a live way or a live setting. I just feel blessed to be part of this KISS family, and I'm very thankful to my older brothers for kind of really, giving me this, love of KISS. I mean, it was around at the perfect time in my life where I really needed something, as a kid, just to, they were just great influences on another level too. Gene, always talked about how he never did drugs. Like you had these positive forces and these guys just, giving a positive message to a musician and a kid to have a dream to do it and really kind of make you feel like, hey, if they did it, I could do it,
I can do it. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that is one thing about this band is just phenomenal. All of us KISS fans are family. And when you get to a point where you get to work with these guys and kind of tell them, hey, you guys, are very responsible for for me getting to where I'm at, and I appreciate it, and it almost becomes, corny to say, but I mean, they truly, it changed all of our lives, I mean, look at the room behind you guys,
Yeah, it's true.
Like,
It's true. Yeah.
it's such a very, very important band in my eyes, and they sometimes don't get the credit they deserve. So I'm just glad that, like I said, at the very least, the music I think will live forever, and we'll see what the avatars bring. But I'm hopeful. Let's see what they can do.
I remember when I saw the Bruce Kulick band on the KISS cruise, and they played Sword and Stone,
Oh,
and I
wow.
went, "Whoa! I can't believe this is happening! What a moment!" And besides playing with Bruce, was there a wow moment on that stage that you could remember?
Yes, believe it or not, once again, we played God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and the crowd, 6,000 people, are singing this,
Oh,
and it almost takes you off of your feet.
Wow.
And it becomes like almost like beyond music. It becomes a feeling that the whole room of 6,000 people singing this song is, just it's pretty wild. I don't know how else to describe it except maybe spiritual. Like this whole room of everyone on the same wavelength,
Yeah.
and singing a song together that you believe in. And but yeah, there was times, you had Eric Singer come up on stage, and you're playing with half of the Revenge lineup, and you're saying, wow, I'm singing Domino and Eric Singer's playing drums right now,
yeah.
So that was a very surreal moment. Eric's a phenomenal player, just a great guy. And, he's funny, he has a great personality. But to watch them playing together and look over and see Eric Singer and then Bruce Kulick. I mean,
Couldn't believe it. Yeah.
yeah,
That's too
because
much.
that when I first got into KISS, that was my KISS, like,
Right.
to that degree, watching KISS Confidential and KISS Extreme Close Up with those guys in it was like, wow,
I'm
so for
playing with
me,
them.
yeah, those two moments for sure. And then we did a Revenge medley, and that was pretty special. And obviously, I have nothing but respect for Bruce as a musician, just incredible. But when you see Todd Kearns command a crowd, he just has something very special as a person and a frontman. But he can really command a crowd. And Brent Fitz, I gotta say, is a phenomenal drummer. Some of the stuff he was doing up there during that Revenge medley, I'm like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
But yeah, those are a few of the highlights that really stuck out, being on stage. So once again, super grateful to be involved in that, and looking forward to doing some more at some point, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well deserved. Joe, we would like to kind of step away a little bit from KISS related work, and
Sure.
Can you tell us what you're doing outside of KISS? So, what projects are you most excited about right now?
Sure. A lot of them do revolve around KISS, which is crazy. Because once you're involved with one KISS project and you meet people, it's like, hey, this guy does this, so hey, do you want to sing Paul vocals on this? Or, you know, so I am writing new country music, which is very exciting, and I'm working with some other songwriters, so I'm really excited for that. Trying to think of what else. I
You've
always
been
have a
doing
lot of,
gigs, right? You've been doing some
yeah,
gigs.
doing a lot of gigs. You know, I was like I said, we were just in Pennsylvania, uh, where is it? New Jersey and New Bedford, Massachusetts. So, you know, it was a busy year. I
And
think we
that's
had
all
like,
original material? Yeah, that's your
uh,
material?
yeah. So, you know, I do originals, but that actually that was some of the dates were with Quarantine too.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, believe it or not, I have children that are into music, so I've been helping them with their career. So they're trying to kind of get off the ground. They're kind of in the spot where I was, like, do I want to play country music or Kiss music? It was like, you know, so I'm telling them I'm staying away. You guys have to choose your own path, you know. So, you know, it's fun to help them, you know, producing demos for them and helping them kind of get a kickstart on their career.
Beautiful.
Um, so yeah, I have a lot of issues, or a lot of not issues, a lot of things going on,
Going on.
a lot of irons in the fire, as they say.
Hmm.
How old are your
Um,
kids, if I may
my
ask?
my oldest son is 18.
Okay.
He'll be 19 next month,
Okay.
and my youngest is 16.
All
Wow.
right.
But they, you know, you know, I think at some point, whether it's the Kiss world or something, I'm sure they'll be, you know, more than involved in playing live somewhere. So I'm sure at some point I'll be able to promote that. I mean, they've opened shows for me before, but I think as far as like doing tours and stuff, I think they have what it takes. It's just a matter of how far they want to take it, you know.
Yes.
So I think you'll see them at some point in the future playing Kiss music or something,
Okay.
or country. Who knows? Like I said, they got to decide for themselves.
Of course.
But yeah, you know, I am doing a lot of other things. But like I said, the quarantine thing is very, very, you know, very, very important, obviously. But it's also there's a lot more going on even when we're not touring, whether it's recording new music, you know, helping with the social media stuff. You know, we all have our little tasks,
Things.
you know, involved with that. So, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on
Nice.
with that all the time. But the country thing, I'm really trying to pull back in and kind of, you know, get to a level where I'm, you know, back out releasing more music again. It's been a couple of years since I actually released a single, so we're a little bit overdue, you
Hmm.
know.
So
So
when you're involved in country music and releasing your music, so does it show like a different side of you as an artist, or you're still the same Joe McGinness from Quarantine, and of course maybe without the showmanship and all of that, but does it touch on another side of of you as an artist?
yeah, it does. Because you know, some of the songs you sing in a Kiss world kind of have some lyrics that are questionable, you know. And then when I write my own songs,
Right.
and you know,
Yeah.
they have different content, and a lot of times they're about life experiences or you know
Mhm.
things that I've experienced. So yeah, they definitely kind of give a different you know kind of um, different vibe and a different kind of feel, a little bit more personal. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Got it.
So you know, but there's still a little bit of that Kiss element in there. You know, writing songs about self-empowerment like Kiss would, or writing songs about having a good time. You
Mhm.
know, there's still a lot of that in my country music.
Got it.
So you know, once again, there'll always be that little bit of element of Kiss in whatever I do.
Mm.
You know, so but yeah, those projects, like I said, probably about 5 months or so, I should have some new music, maybe even sooner. I don't want to say sooner, but I'm going to say about 5 months realistically.
Yeah.
And I have some great friends at radio that have always kind of taken care of me there. So whenever they like something, they'll spin it. So thankfully, you know, we'll see how it goes though.
It's funny you mentioned your kids and music. I often hear, you know, when Paul says, you know, about someone wanting to get into the music business, he says, listen, either do it 100% or don't do it at all, you know?
That's right. That's right.
What would be your advice to your kids or anybody that wants to get into the music world?
Well, yeah, once again, to kind of quote Paul, like you have to have that passion. And the other thing too is I kind of did it, without knowing this at the time, but I never gave myself a safety net with like, hey, let's as a
Like a plan
backup,
B. Right,
yeah,
right.
I'm not going to be I'm not going to be a surgeon. I know that. So it was do or die, and I'm going to work my butt off on becoming the best musician that I can and see where it takes me. So I feel like, not having that safety net below makes you walk a tightrope very precisely. And, it got me to where I am, thankfully, because if I would have failed, it would have been a pretty sad thing, but I'm pretty fortunate to, have experienced these things.
To
And
be
I
where you
feel
are.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think having no other choice made you like sink or swim. It's like this
Yeah.
is it, so give it your all.
Another thing Paul said is that, listen, you have the talent or you don't. And if you have the talent. And if you do, pursue it. If you don't, pursue other things. I think
Sure.
in your case, you have that talent. There was no option. You weren't going to fail. There's absolutely no way.
Well, thanks. It's funny because just like anyone else that's human, you sometimes doubt yourself and say, geez, well, what if I'm not, this, or what if I can't do that? And in the, as they say, you find out pretty quickly, uh, when you get to a situation, it's sink or swim. And it was, one of those things. I worked hours. You know how they say the 10,000 hour rule, that
Yeah.
you do something for 10,000 hours. I'm pretty certain I got to 10,000 and kept going because, when you love something enough, it's not really work. But there is, a lot of time you put in that effort and the passion and to make things precise and, you know, or to come easy. But yeah, you got to have the talent too. Some people are just naturally gifted. My
Mhm.
oldest son can hear a guitar solo and he could just play it. And
Wow.
Wow.
it's like that's a good sign. So he has that raw talent, and I think my youngest son, he's definitely talented too, and he's starting to get to that point. So we'll see. He's more of a drummer though,
Oh, okay.
and he's really picking up on that. But there are perks to growing up in a musical family. That's for sure.
Mhm.
For some of the people that have become like virtuosos that say, I never had a musical family. I never had anyone to teach me. I picked it up, and those are phenomenons. And but I feel fortunate to have grown up in the situation where I was surrounded by music. Um, but yeah, that talent factor, is pretty interesting to think
Oh
about
yeah.
it that way.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Another dream that all Kiss fans have is that, they start as Kiss fans, but then they somehow get into the inner circle of the band. And you accomplish that. The closest I've come is paying $5,000 for a meet and greet. What would you tell a Kiss fan, who wants to get into the inner circle of the band? How's
Well,
that possible?
I think Kiss fans. I think Kiss fans are attracted to I'm trying to think of anything that could convey that feeling that Kiss gives you. And like this podcast that you're doing, you guys do a great job
Thank
at
you.
conveying your
Thank you.
love for it. So I don't see any reason why you guys won't get there, because I think as long as what you're doing is genuine, and eventually the cream rises to the top, right? And you guys doing a phenomenal job. You love the band. It's just a matter of time where, okay, you meet one person and then that person introduces you to the next. Um, with music, it's also a tricky thing because there's a lot of people out there, that, have different talents, whether it's guitar, singing, but podcasting is another way. I mean, there's just so many ways to celebrate Kiss. And I think as the years go on, and they keep doing, now that Pop House owns, Kiss, no telling what they're going to do. So they could bring you guys on the Kiss cruise, and next thing you know, that's the great thing about all of the degrees of Kiss, is you just never know where your life is going to end up by being in this family. So, I think just like anyone else, there's a little bit of luck, but there's also, you got to have the talent, and you guys are sure talented enough at what you do. You're both great with the mic. You ask great questions. So, a couple of years down the road, you could be conducting an interview with Paul and Gene, or, whoever. But it all starts organically, and it starts from that love for the band. And I think, that comes out in whatever you do. In this case, for me, it's music, and singing those songs that have been part of my life,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. This is actually,
of course,
highly appreciated. And Joe, before we close the recording on this episode and looking ahead, are there any dream collaborations, albums, videos, or live concepts that you would love to make happen in the Kiss universe or beyond?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, it never hurts to have a member of Kiss, around. So if they wanted to do a collaboration, obviously that would be huge. Getting to share a dressing room with Paul Stanley, and just, seeing him and Doc, conversing and saying, oh, I want to go over and say hi and whatever, but I'm going to give him a minute. Little stuff like that. You never know where it can lead. So if you're in a situation where, like in my case, working with Bruce and playing with Eric, and, I'd love to have, a collaboration with any of those guys. As far as rock music goes, there's a lot of, amazing artists out there. Once again, the Kiss relation, you never know who you're going to run into. Yeah. So, I like Rudy Sarzo a lot. I like musicians, in the rock world, but in the country world, it'd be great to do something with Brad Paisley or someone like that. But yeah, some of my collaborations have already happened. I always dreamed of working with Bruce Kulick, so to record songs with them,
it's already happening.
Yeah, and then to play, some of those songs live was another trip. So yeah, I mean, dream collaborations. Always Kiss is always going to be at that number one level. Anyone from Kiss, obviously. I am really sad about the passing of Ace. That was a huge blow to our community, as you know. Yeah. And there was times when, Bruce introduced me to Ace officially backstage at a show one time, and I was saying, oh, maybe someday I'll get to work with Ace, but apparently, wasn't in the cards. But huge fan of Ace, obviously, and just super tragic. But yeah, all those guys are always at the top of my list as far as collaboration. So if any of them are listening and they want to come on and do a Kuarantine song, join a Kuarantine track,
How awesome would that be?
Oh, that'd be pretty wild.
So Joe, you mentioned passion earlier, and I gotta be honest, in the past maybe year or two, I've been having sort of like a Kiss existential crisis where my passion is up and down, up and down. And I've talked about it with Claudio. It's this podcast that really keeps me linked to my passion with the band, to the fans, to the history of the band. And I'm saying that because what a way to start 2026, interviewing you, where my passion level is right back up here again. And I want to keep it up here for 2026 and maintain it for the rest of the year. So thank you so much for being on the show and giving us, that foundation to maintain that passion for this incredible band.
Well, thank you. It's my honor. And, I think we've all been through those crisis situations with Kiss where you'll get upset about this or that. And, or, hey, I can't believe they're doing this and I can't believe they didn't do that. But in the end, I always look at the love that, the experiences that this band has given me, and the friendships, friendships and all the relationships of, people that I've met throughout the years. I'm like, I've got my money's worth with this band. They've
Oh yeah.
given me so much happiness, and I'll always be a fan in one form or another, whether I agree with what they say or do or any of that stuff, um, because of the relationships and the happiness that they've given not just me but all of us. Because that's what life is about, right? Is happiness and friendships and having great people, and the music is just the best soundtrack to go along with that. When you listen to a song and it
It is true.
brings you back to your teenage years, or there's certain things that remind you of a certain time of your life and you smile about it. And there could be spots where you frown upon it, say, geez, I remember this horrible time. But most of them, I think, as long as you have 90% good ones,
Hmm.
that's a great reason to stay
Oh yeah.
in this community. And
Absolutely.
I think we all are very, very fortunate to have each other. This is just
Yeah.
such a great band and a great community. So
Oh yeah. With so many years, following the band, and of course, as you said before, there's going to be ups and downs, but the balance is always positive, man. So look what we're doing here. So we're having beautiful discussion. We spent a little bit more than an hour having a very uh, I have to say it was not like an interview. It was a conversation
Yeah.
amongst friends.
Yeah.
This
absolutely.
it feels like that. And just before we let you go, Joe, I just wanted to tell you that as Paz was saying, the talent is there. You were talking about a little bit of luck that you need to have, but
Hmm.
please, we have to remind ourselves hard work. So, the work ethic, man, because, today
Absolutely.
everything, seems to be so light that it's pure luck. It is not. If you put
Mm.
the hard work there, if you put, what you need to put, things happen. And you're the proof, man. So everything that has happened to you and is happening to you, it's not casual, man. It's thanks to all the love, the passion, and the work that you're putting there. So congratulations,
Uh,
man.
well, thank you so much. That means a lot. Like I said, I'm just very grateful, for all the great stuff that has come my way. Um, and yeah, hopefully, there'll be more in the future. We'll see,
Keep it
right?
up.
Oh,
That's
for
right.
sure. For
That's
sure.
right.
So thanks again, Joe.
Thank you, guys.
To the KISS Army, once again, Happy New Year, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please send them to talktome@kissarmynationpodcast.com. Until next time, remember, never stop rocking in 2026 and beyond. Take care, everyone.